Many of us are by the fire, forsaken. I speak of thine kind and mine. Behold this city. We are kindred, but like two eyes which gaze upon the other. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
The sermons of the white-faced locust preachers are quite often easy on the ears. They speak of calm, they speak of peace. They speak of a gentle darkness, of an abyss that does not want. And it's not just their message that's inviting. The inflection and tone of their voice is a picture of serenity and gentleness. But despite this friendly and inviting demeanor, there is often more to someone than a simple first impression. If we wish to illuminate the truth and the lies behind the words of the locust preachers, then we'll have to regain our fire and venture deep into the vast, empty abyss. But be cautious, fellow undead, because our embers might just cast twisted, shriveled shadows upon the floor. And in the all-consuming darkness, we might very well stumble our way straight into the feast, and we'll learn firsthand whether or not there's anything to fear. Hello everyone, and welcome to another entry in the Sun Brothers lore series. My name is Don, and as you've probably guessed, today we're going to be taking a look at absolutely everything we know about the white-faced locust preachers found in the Ring City DLC of Dark Souls 3, as well as doing some good old-fashioned detective work, and supplying a healthy dose of purely unadulterated speculation. All this to find the secrets that might be lying just inside the chitinous shell of these eloquent clergymen of the Abyss. Within the game's files, these creatures were initially referred to as Abaddon. The name Abaddon is pulled from scriptures of Abrahamic faiths. In the Old Testament, it is typically used to refer to a quote-unquote place of destruction. Sometimes a fixed location, but other times it appears as a more mobile concept, if still inanimate. In the Christian New Testament, however, Abaddon's chief mention is that of the role of an archangel who not only holds the keys to the bottomless pit, which is another name for Sheol or Hell, but he is known as the Destroyer and presides over an army of locusts the size of horses. It's impossible for us to know exactly how deep into the Christian theology Miyazaki was looking whenever he decided to use this for their original file name, nor is it wise for us to attempt to draw any conclusions from something as hidden and potentially completely rewritten as a character's original file name. And even if it was, it's still not really possible for us to determine what, for lack of a better term, what side the name places the locust preachers on. Even among Christian scholars, there's much debate over whether or not Abaddon is considered a fallen angel, like Lucifer, or if he was placed into his role by God himself. That being said, I still think it's important to take a quick detour into the history and uses of the name within the scriptures in order to see just how many correlations we can find between the entity mentioned there and the white-faced locusts in game. Revelation chapter 9 describes his origin thusly. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to a bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. And then out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. They were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green thing, or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. The shape of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months, and they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. Revelation 20, 1-3 states, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a little while." Holy shit, there's a lot to unpack here. So we'll start with the obvious correlations, which is the physical description of the Locust that Abaddon leads. While there may be a few elements missing in the Locust that we encounter, it's easy to see why some of them were left off. But let's check everything we can off our list. These Locusts are indeed about the size of a horse, and hey, if you were drunk off your behind and saw one of these silhouetted from the side, it might kind of even look like a horse. Sort of. While the Locusts we encounter might not wear, quote, crowns of something like gold, they definitely have the faces of men, and the hair of a woman cascading down their back and, shoulders, I guess. Teeth like a lion, not so much, but I feel like this could be an intentional design choice on Frum's part in order to keep them more human and more inviting. Nobody's gonna believe the giant insect monster with razor-sharp teeth that it doesn't want to eat people. Which, I guess, brings us to the next physical aspect, a breastplate of iron. It may not be quite iron, but bug chitin can be incredibly tough, especially when combined with other materials. For instance, when combined with calcium carbonate, it produces a very dense composite that forms the shells of things like crustaceans and mollusks. We'll call this one a maybe, though. Wings sounding like chariots, I don't really see a need to justify. If you've ever heard a normal-sized locust flapping its wings, you know how insanely loud even one little guy can be. Now make him the size of a horse? Yeah. The last physical aspect of them is a stinger like a scorpion, and it's hard to determine if the locusts in the Ringed City are actually equipped with a stinger or not. It may at first certainly look like it, but many arthropods have similar appendages jutting out of their abdomen, and not for the purpose of stinging. In fact, in females of many species, this long appendage is used for laying eggs. There are 3 locust preachers that you will encounter before entering the abyssal swamp in the Ringed City, and each one will deliver some insight into the adventures and stories of various NPCs whom we likely encounter throughout the main game. We're going to examine each one of these sermons individually and compare them against the stories of individuals that we've met, not only to openly expose their identities, but also to balance the truth of their own stories against the preacher's own professed truths.
One was a wayfaring knight on an endless, forbidden search. Only the abyss granted closure, if not reunion with his beloved. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
This is quite commonly believed to refer to Alva, and that's by far the most sound theory. After all, Alva invades us in the Ringed City not long after this encounter. It may not name him explicitly this time around, but I think it's pretty obvious this is the same Alva we encountered in Irithyll, who, at that time, is likely seeking Carla. The same Alva who, in Dark Souls 2, became entangled with Zuli the Witch, whose armor set can be found just behind where he invades us, as if he meant to protect it from us. The Locust Preacher tells us that only the Abyss granted Alva closure, and it may have even reunited him with his beloved, with Zuli. But is there any truth to this? It's hard to say. It is worth noting that we acquire her set from a corpse, frozen in a position that doesn't really give the immediate impression of peace. Is this Zuli's corpse then? It is entirely possible that in Alva's world she is still alive and is there with him, even if she isn't in ours. But unfortunately for Alva, I don't think that's the case here. If she were still alive, he would likely see no reason at all to invade us here. How would he know where her corpse would be if he hadn't seen it for himself? So this then leads to what I think is an important question when it comes to discerning the nature of the Locust preacher's words. Was Zuli still alive when Alva got here? Regardless of the answer to this question, the argument could be made that the Ringed City at the edge of the Endless Abyss did in fact reunite Alva and Zuli. Alive or dead, the circumstance of both their bodies occupying immediate physical spaces can, by definition, be construed as a reunion. And even if their story doesn't have a happy ending, it still has an ending that would provide Alva with closure. But if that's the case, then that gives us a lot of insight into how far the Locust preachers are willing to twist the truth of a story to make it fit their own narrative. For the most convincing lies are always buried half in truth and the other half in the ignorance of the listener. But is this the case? Is this chitiney clergyman intentionally deceiving us into thinking that the Abyss is a happier ending than it is in truth? For now, it's hard to say. We just don't have enough to go off of within this single story to make an informed and unbiased opinion about their intentions.
1. Met the dark with learning, but in the end learned his knowledge was wanting. The world began without knowledge, and without knowledge will it end. Does not this ring clear and true? Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
Well, this is unexpected. I don't often have visitors. What do you want? This is my study that you've happened upon. If you haven't any business, I've reading to get back to. How intriguing. Very well. Indeed, I am a sorcerer, with plenty to share. However, what champion demands service without recompense? Clearly, you're not that sort of woman. So you will make me a promise that in exchange for my teaching, you will bring me knowledge in the form of scrolls detailing sorcery's secrets. Well, can you assure me of this? Very well. You're no fool. I take it you understand the weight of a promise. I am Orbeck, of Vinheim, unkindled one. I shall teach you sorceries. We will learn together. It shall be like our very own school.
This piece of dialogue is believed to refer to Orbeck of Vinheim, and truthfully, there's not much about this one that lends itself toward any deceit or falsities. Orbeck did indeed pursue knowledge of sorcery wherever it may be found, and the Dark likely wouldn't have offered much deterrence to an undead who had the potential to stand as a challenger to the title of Lord of Hollows. If you complete his questline, you will find his body and his ashes at a table in the Grand Archives. But why is this? Well, as we know, an undead's ability to survive is heavily reliant on their ability to hold on to some purpose, need, or desire. Orbeck's driving purpose was to acquire the knowledge of sorcery that he had been denied while serving as a glorified assassin at the Vinheim Dragon School. We regularly bring him sorcery scrolls of lost and legendary caliber, and after he has absorbed all possible knowledge from us and vice versa, he leaves for the last frontier of unknown sorceries, the Grand Archives. It's unclear how much time is supposed to have passed, but regardless of how much time it may have taken, Orbeck died there. Why? One possible reason is that he learned all he could. The undeath that he once saw as a blessing because it allowed him to study endlessly was now a curse because there was nothing left to study. Think about all the scrolls that you've brought him by this point. Scrolls of sorcery from every age and every land. The sorceries of Vinheim, of Logan, of Seath, of Ulasil. He may very well have acquired all the world's regarded knowledge on sorcery. What then? What else is there but death and hollowing? Whether he ended his own life in despair, or whether he simply gave up and the scholars here killed him, it doesn't really change anything. It is also possible that Orbeck discovered something that either actively destroyed him or caused him to destroy himself, Perhaps some tome or magical artifact that through an unforeseen barrier or rebound took his life. In the image icon for his ashes, he is clutching a scroll, after all, though it could also be that the scroll was his last contribution to the world of sorcery, a written insight or perhaps the cumulative knowledge of his journey through the depths of magic with the Unkindled One. Regardless of which ending to Orbek's story is correct, the Locust Preacher really does offer us some honest insight into his story. He met the dark with learning, but in the end, his knowledge was not and would not ever be enough to save him.
One poor girl slew her own kin, but even so was embraced, enveloped by the abyss. 'Twas a comfort that neither moon nor sunless sky afforded her before. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
To many, myself included, this is highly reminiscent of the questline of Cirrus of the Sunless Realms. It is unclear exactly where this location is, but one place we know of that the moon never sets is in Orlando and in the Boreal Valley. She also buffs her weapon with Dark Moon Blade and consistently wishes blessings of the moon upon our journey. So whether she was from Irithyll or not, and whether she was from a recent timeline or not, she was undoubtedly at one time a Dark Moon Knightess. An important thing to remember here, though, is that Yorshka refers to herself as captain to this knightless company.
Very well. Captain to this knightless company I remain. I will grant thee purpose.
Whether Yorshka is aware of it or not, however, Cirrus clearly still considers herself an adherent to the ideology of the Dark Moon Knights, even if no longer officially a knightess in title. So much so that she would personally slay an undead prone to invasion, deceit, and murder, the acts of a mindless, godless hollow, especially the foul fingers of Rosaria, a covenant fully devoted to invading and pillaging from other Unkindled in service to their goddess. If you would like to know more about Rosaria, her true identity, and the hidden purpose and motives behind those who invade and pillage in order to carry out her will, click the link down below in the description to check out our full-length video on the subject. Moving back to Cirrus, however, being sworn to the slaying of mad invading spirits granted her a most solemn duty. Her own grandfather, Holy Knight Hodrick, was a mad, violent hollow, and he was no foreigner to leaving mounds of other undead in his wake. Hollow as they come, and only maintaining a semblance of sanity by befriending the pile of corpses that he'd slain. They were his family, and so when you and Cirrus travel to the Pit of Hollows to confront him, he does not see his granddaughter. She and the Unkindled with her are far too alive. They would be better off slain and added to the pile, to become a part of his family. When you complete Cirrus' quest, she swears fealty to you, and when you complete your own quest, she loses her final purpose. With the last of her binding knightly oaths fulfilled, she has lost all reason to continue, and she dies, with her talisman and her grandfather's shield upon her corpse. The living world offered nothing but hollowing for her now. Only in death, in the depths of the abyss, could she find true peace. In these first few sermons, we really see a repeating pattern of these individual stories ending in death. And while that may seem like a bad thing, remember, the curse of undeath has been ravaging humanity for countless ages. The idea of being able to die freely and in peace has to sound attractive to those afflicted by the curse, especially to those who have made it all the way to the Forbidden Ringed City to be beckoned by the white-faced Locust Preacher.
And so, she lived in fear of the dark, of the things that gnawed at her flesh, and yet the abyss hath yet to produce any such creature. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
Oh, forgive me. I am Irina of Karim. I came to this land so that I might be a firekeeper. Your touch has freed me from the darkness. You are a champion, then? I am weak and unfit to tend the flames. But if it would not trouble you, might I enter into your service instead?
From the moment you meet her, she is terrified of being slowly devoured by small, insect-like creatures that must surely hide in the dark.
Who is there? Someone there? Anyone? Oh, please, whoever you are, touch me. The dark surrounds me, nibbles at my flesh. Little creatures, they never stop biting. So please, hold out your hand and touch me.
If we listen to the Locust Preacher, then this fear is all for nothing, because the dark has never produced any such creatures. But is that entirely true? Tiny biting insects are certainly a familiar concept thanks to things like the Pontiff Knights and the Gnaw miracles, but the insects are always referenced as lurking and residing in the deep. Can the Abyss really be held responsible for what resides within the deep, when they are most certainly two completely different entities? The deep would likely not even exist in its current state without such an artificially prolonged age of fire. There would be no surplus of human dregs constantly sinking downward into the deep, being corrupted and becoming food for the tiny, biting insects. There's a pretty glaring issue within the Preacher's statement that the Abyss has never produced any such creature as an insect that devours the flesh of men, though. Namely, that the abyssal swamp of the Ring City is literally crawling with other locusts who are actively trying to eat your flesh. The Preacher's right arm description tells us that the white-faced locusts were meant to beckon men to the dark with sermons, but most of them are unable to think past their own stomachs, the unruly mob. This one sentence gives us two reasons to be wary of the Locust Preacher's words. One, it as much as admits that these locust men who reside within the muck of the Abyss have lost themselves to their hunger. And if you listen closely, you can still hear these gluttonous insects repeating their Preacher's tagline.
Search thy own self. Let the feast begin. Search thy feast begin.
Just like humans, the locusts are creatures of dark, of the Abyss. In other words, the Abyss has very clearly produced such a creature at least once. Of course, the Preacher would likely counter this with saying that those locusts have lost their way and become corrupted, no doubt by the gods or the fire or some other convenient enemy. They'd insist that they were never meant to be mindless pits of hunger, which brings us to the second reason to be wary of the Locust Preacher that we learn from its right arm. It is literally their job to beckon men to the dark. Does this inherently mean that they're lying or being dishonest? Of course not. Technically, it's the job of any preacher or missionary to beckon men to their cause, and that doesn't make every minister of the world evil or dishonest. It does, however, let us know that the Locust Preachers are expected to fulfill a certain role. And where there is a role to be filled, there will always be individuals with true ambition who seek to take that role to the next level. Such is the nature of dark, after all. That desire to draw men in at any cost could indeed cause the locusts to be less than honest with their preaching. So far, however, this sermon seems to be the most deliberately misleading. Still, though, it does not appear to be an outright lie. Even if some locusts have turned to devouring flesh, the argument can reasonably be made that it's a direct result of something the Preacher mentions in the last in-game sermon to be heard, which references Arena's protector, Egan of Kareem.
And so, despite his weighty armor, he lived in fear of a delicate thing, little more than a girl. Where fire resideth, shadows twist and shrivel, but in the abyss there are shadows none. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
This sermon repeats an idea that we've heard mentioned many times throughout the Souls series. The idea that the dark and the abyss were never inherently evil, but that the seal of fire casts unnatural shadows in the dark, and that it twisted and changed them into horrible things that they would never have otherwise been. Humanity and dark are known to be overcome with want, but how could they not be when they've been denied their own age that natural progression had ordained? Dark might never have felt any need to writhe against its shackles, had the gods never shackled it. It's somewhat reminiscent of the story of Fenrir in Norse mythology. Odin had seen in his visions that Fenrir, son of Loki, would be present at Ragnarok, Norse mythology's apocalypse. Odin knew that Fenrir would devour the sun, and that he would kill Odin himself. In order to prevent this, or in some versions of the story just to postpone it, Odin and the other gods tricked Fenrir into being bound by an unbreakable magic ribbon. In this act of deception, Odin made a guaranteed enemy of the Fenris wolf. Fenrir told Odin he had been more than willing to be friend to the gods, but because they had deceived him and bound him, he was going to kill them. Odin created this self-fulfilling prophecy of Fenrir being an enemy by treating him as an enemy from the beginning. In much the same way, Gwyn was so terrified at the prospect of renewed darkness and the things that lurked within, that he shackled the dark with fire. And the twisting of the shadows in the dark likely created the very kinds of things he feared. I think one of the best examples of this happening is the Pus of Man. Very little is known about this entity, but it is regarded as a corruption of the Abyss. It primarily seems to exist within men, but we've also seen instances of this pus infecting wyverns, such as the 2 wyverns located at the Dragon Barracks in Lothric Castle. The most significant encounter with this pus, however, would probably be at the very beginning of the game, in our first boss battle with Udex Gundyr. Sometime between becoming the sheath to a coiled sword and our encounter with him, Gundyr was infected with this pus. But why? How? Well, he's been alive and around for a very long time, but just being around isn't enough to cause this to sprout. I think the pus sprouting from Gundyr is a direct result of his being used as a sheath for the coiled sword, a sword of flame. Between the seal of fire Gwyn placed to keep man's darkness in, and the fire of the coiled sword burning within him, what choice would Gundyr's humanity have but to run wild, and to pour out of his dark sign, or perhaps a dark sigil, in a giant, flowing, grotesque mass? There is one more Locust sermon that was cut from game, and since it was cut, it's important that we not put too much stock in it, but I do want to read it for you nonetheless. Of all the fingers, he alone was embraced by the Abyss, for he was human, and ne'er a grub. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin. This is believed to be a reference to Ringfinger Leonard, as he's the only known male finger of Rosaria who actively refused rebirth. There's a lot of info on Leonard in the Rosaria lore video that we mentioned earlier as well, so that's just another reason for you to give that one a watch. I don't want to take too much time to validate the truth of this statement since it was cut, but on the surface, there really isn't anything that conflicts with anything else we know about Leonard. So overall, I think I'd be willing to say that the Locust Preachers do a fantastic job of offering us only half-truths and more mysteries. They claim that the Abyss has never produced any flesh-eating insects, but they know full well how many of their kin have taken to devouring flesh with great pleasure. But do those locusts not still live in peace with themselves and their existence? It may well be the embracing of the Abyss that allows one to live within it peacefully. Or it may just be that when you submit to the Abyss, you will be devoured by something that can exist peacefully within it. Only by refusing it and causing it to twist and shrivel does the dark truly become evil. If we believe the sermons of the Locust Preachers, this pattern is what all creations of the Abyss were subjected to. They were gentle on their own, but fire changed them. We've heard many mentions of a calm and gentle dark, and while hope may be lost for as long as the seal of fire burns, which may be forever, I do still believe there is a world out there where dark can live completely free of the twisting influence of the fire. Aldrich sees an age of the deep seas, and I like to think this age that he sees is the world painted by the white-haired girl in Ariandel. She seeks to create a world with a liquid pigment that has never been used before, a pigment that could create a world that would never rot and would never be corrupted by fire. I want to take just a little bit of time now and focus on the appearance of the Locust without referring to any sources outside of the game. They claim to have been around since the beginning and claim to be kindred spirits to men. Personally, this is not problematic for me, for a few reasons. First, take a look at the face of the Locust men and compare it to the face of the pygmies we encounter here in the Ring City. They do actually appear quite similar, and I think that's an intentional design choice. The pygmies fathered humanity, but it's highly likely there were other offshoots and evolutions that forked off from early ancestries and changed and adapted to their new environment while it slowly sunk into the abyss. Another really interesting design choice here is that the Locust's abdomen has an almost identical appearance to the shell on the bottoms of the angels. Whether this is a lore-based choice, once again creating a Locust-Angel correlation like we examined with the name Abaddon, or it's just from reusing an asset that no one is really supposed to be able to get close enough to see, it's hard to tell. But I think at this point we can safely say that Miyazaki stuck to his normal motif, which is to actually acquire knowledge on a subject that he wants to emulate somewhere in the game. This tells us something fairly important, but not entirely helpful. It means he probably adhered somewhat to Abaddon's scriptural purpose. The white-faced Locust will open the abyss to all through their sermons, until the world has been invited into darkness. And then they will torment and devour all those who do not bear the proper mark. A symbol that proclaims you as one of the chosen, who has submitted to the abyss. The mark of man. Whether this is an actual physical mark or just a metaphor, who knows? A dark sigil, perhaps? Something that marks us as indisputably born of the pygmies by the humanity that pours out of it? This all leaves us with the burning and nigh unanswerable question at the very center of the Dark Souls universe. Is the dark evil, or is it the shadows of fire that make it so? Is it the denial of the dark that makes it retaliate? Without the shackles of fate and the fire to bind it, would it cease to writhe and wriggle? Is it possible that the Locust will devour and torment not out of spite, but because it is their holy duty to do so? If the natural progression into the Age of Dark can only truly begin when all traces of those who worship the light are snuffed out, then what other choice do they have when someone simply refuses to bend? Perhaps the Locust truly would rather see us seated at the table as guests than laid out to be devoured as the meal. Surely that is the path of righteousness mentioned in the description for the white preacher head, to ignore one's own hunger in order to feed an even greater amount of beloved and valued guests. However, regardless of the intentions of the white-faced Locust preachers, and regardless of whether you heed their call to let go of your fear of the dark, one day the world will fall completely to darkness. It will cover all things with the blackness of the abyss. The sun will not shine, and the moon will be smothered. Those gathered will raise their heads, unfold their hands, and proclaim with one joyous voice,
Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are still watching, thank you so much for sticking it out through this entire video. When I started the script for this one, I honestly didn't expect that it would be anywhere near as long as our other lore videos, but the more I dug into the Locust, there was just always more to find and another rabbit hole to fall down. But honestly, that's what makes these videos so fun for me. No matter how much I might think I know about a concept or character in game, there's always some piece of info or a reference that I've missed. And that still stands right now after completing a lore video on this subject. There will always be things that I miss, so if you know of any or if you just want to discuss the video or other lore ideas, please leave a comment or jump on over to the Sun Brothers Discord, where we have an entire channel dedicated to lore discussions, as well as a PvP channel, so you guys have an easy way to find PvP, not only with us occasionally, but with each other as well. For anyone who's interested and wants to support us in a more direct way, you can head on over to our Patreon. Ron and I both work full-time jobs and are always crazy busy with other side hustles too, so any bit of monetary help means that we can spend that much less time at other stuff and more time making videos for you guys. Of course, whether you're a patron or not, thank you all so much. I personally just love doing these lore videos, primarily because I'm also such a huge fan of watching them. So big thanks to all the YouTubers who inspired me to start this lore series. Vati, Zuli, Lance McDonald, Hawkshaw, The Ashen Hollow, etc., etc. You guys know the ones, okay? Finally, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you can catch our other lore videos, guide videos, comedy videos, and whatever else we're working on as soon as it releases. Thanks again, and God bless.